Hello, honeys, and welcome back to our first full-length episode of March. Once again, I apologize for the delays in this week's episode. Your girl had a migraine. It was not fun. And thankfully, now it's over, so we can get back to business. Today, we are talking not only about, a bit of Women's History Month, accidentally, but also a good old American classic, because why not? So, honeys, let's talk about the one, the only, Lady Liberty. Very nice short citation list today. Ow, thanks, table. First up, Pat Brower's Statue of Liberty, posted on Britannica.com, updated December 27th of 2023. An article titled Creating the Statue of Liberty in Statue of Liberty National Monument, New York, webpage posted by the National Park Service and which was updated February 7th of 2023. We've also got the Statue of Liberty UNESCO World Heritage Site list page and synopsis. The Statue of Liberty website itself, posted by the Ellis Island Foundation, Incorporated. And finally, Lindsay Turley's Myths Surrounding the Origin of the Statue of Liberty article, posted by the Museum of the City of New York in January of 2014. For all of my honeys not based in New York City, here's a couple factoids about Lady Liberty to get us started. Obviously, her location is in the upper New York Bay of the U.S. Her height in total is 305 feet, 93 meters, including the pedestal, and she commemorates both the revolutionary spirits of and the friendship between the peoples of the US and France. Something I didn't know, the part that you can visit has changed over time. Originally, it was the torch. From 1886 to 1916, the viewing deck was via the torch, and that stood 29 feet, 8.8 meters, from the flame tip to the bottom of the handle. It was accessible at that time via a 42-foot, 12.8 meter service ladder inside the arm. These days, one gets to the top via an elevator to the designated observation deck, located in the pedestal reached by the stairway, from which a spiral staircase leads to an observation platform in her crown. So basically, a whole lot more extra steps to get up to her crown. That's where you can see stuff from these days. A couple clarifications on the important texts associated with the statue and their locations on the statue. The booklet she holds is inscribed with the date of the Declaration of Independence. The plaque at the pedestal's entrance is the one with the famous Emma Lazarus 1883 sonnet, The New Colossus, with the famous lines of "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free," etc., etc. And of course, our list of main characters. Low-key, a ton of people worked on this thing. The propositioner of the statue was actually not the same guy as the sculptor. Edward de la Bouille, the propositioner, was technically a historian by trade. The guy who actually ended up designing and sculpting it was, Frederic Auguste Bartholdi, a French architect and artist born 1834 and died in 1904. The guys who ended up hammering out and creating the original inner iron framework, as well as the copper sheeting which forms the details of the dress, face, etc., were Eugene Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc, living from 1814 through 1879, and Alexander Gustave Eiffel, yes, that Eiffel, who lived 1832 to 1923. Later, in its post-USA arrival, the pedestal was designed and built by American architect Richard Morris Hunt, who lived from 1827 through 1895. Okay, honeys, story time. Our saga begins with a young Frenchman with a dream. Le Bouillet successfully proposed the idea for the statue in 1865 to the French government. The proven for sure reasons why he wants it, according to the statueofliberty.org, which is the website owned and operated by the Ellis Island Foundation, says that Le Bourrier was a huge fan and supporter of the USA and its ideals. He, quote, wished to commemorate the centennial of the Declaration of Independence, as well as celebrate the close relationship between France and America, end quote. The other reason, which is a little bit more disputed, according to the same site, is, quote, he was equally moved by the recent abolition of slavery in the U.S., which furthered America's ideals of liberty and freedom, end quote. However, the City Museum of New York does not agree with this potential reasoning. They say, quote, there have been many claims on the internet and elsewhere that the Statue of Liberty was originally intended to commemorate the end of slavery in the United States following the end of the Civil War, and that the model for the statue was an African American woman, end quote. They later, in that article, go on to say, quote, the museum can't affirm or deny any of the claims about the statue's origins, end quote, as well as, quote, the museum has no documentation to interpret the symbolism of these chains, end quote, referring to ones on the feet of an 1870 terracotta maquette of the Statue of Liberty in their collections. To make a very long story short, Le Bourrier proposed it to the French government. They're like, heck yes, we're friends with the Americans. We share their liberty and freedom ideals. We are close buds with them. Let's do it. And so then, Bartholdi begins work in 1875. He was of a very similar fan kind of mindset as Le Bourrier regarding the U.S., and began designing the structure after hearing Le Bourrier's speech calling for a commemorative action of the U.S. and the relationship between the two nations. Bartholdi also incorporated multiple elements of symbolism into the design of the Statue of Liberty. For example, the crown is meant to represent a sun, with the spikes as its sun rays extending out towards the world. The tablet is inscribed, as I mentioned, with the date of American independence in Roman numerals, July 4th, 1776, and the broken shackle and chains at the statue's feet, as we have discussed, could very well refer in some way to the end of slavery in the United States. Importantly, Bartholdi also hired Eiffel at some point during this construction. Now, Bartholdi hired him before he went on to Tower fame, and there's a question of whether or not Eiffel could have or would have even had the opportunity to create that there tower without this gig. So, cool kind of happy coincidence, in the words of an art legend. Once Bartholdi, Eiffel, and all the other boots on the ground, so to speak, get involved, the process of making the Statue of Liberty became pretty rapid. By 1876, the arm holding the torch was completed, and the same year was shown at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. In 1778, the head and shoulders were completed and displayed at the Paris Universal Exposition, and between 1881 and 1884, the entire statue was completed and assembled in Paris. Also in 1884, the construction of the pedestal began in the United States. The statue was presented the same year to the American minister by a Frenchman of the name Levi Morton, who would later go on to be vice president, in a ceremony in Paris on July 4th, 1884. Apparently, the American minister's reaction was something like a very polite, politically correct, I don't get it, but thank you. As you can probably guess, by this point in the story, everyone in most of the world is paying attention, at the very least, Europe and the United States, is paying attention to the building of this statue, what exactly it means that the US and France are working together to do it, so on. And it's important to realize exactly why there was so much attention on it then and why the Statue of Liberty continues to be such a big deal historically, culturally, architecturally, so on today. First off, context. I know I've said it 1,000 times before. I'll say it 1,000 times again. Context is everything. There was a spike in popularity of colossal statuary, which is this same sort of way over life scale, absolutely huge statues in the 19th century, which not only imitated traditions from antiquity, aka, ancient Greece and Rome, but also incorporated twists inspired by Art Nouveau. So elements of flora and fauna, much more curvy, organic forms, for example. This combination was meant to express modern aspirations. The statue's architecture and engineering is also very historically important. As UNESCO says, quote, "The design and construction were recognized at the time as one of the greatest technical achievements of the 19th century and hailed as a bridge between art and engineering," end quote. Perhaps most significant of all, though, is the fact that the sculpture's construction and really everything was financed by international subscription. The funds that were used throughout the process were contributed by both American as well as French citizens, mostly split down the line of statue creation and shipping assigned to the French people, and the creation of the pedestal and assembly in the US assigned to the American people. French funding methods included public fees and various forms of entertainment, as well as a lottery system. American funding methods included things like benefit theatrical events, art exhibitions, auctions, and prize fights. Actually, poet Emma Lazarus wrote her famous sonnet, The New Colossus, for an 1883 art and literary auction. Apparently, though, some encouragement was still needed for the funding beyond these efforts. Quote, "To spark public action in 1885, Joseph Pulitzer placed an ad in his paper, The New York World, inviting readers to donate to the cause. In exchange, Pulitzer printed each donor's name in the newspaper. The public rose to the challenge, with 120,000 people donating over $100,000 and securing the remaining funds needed for the statue's pedestal," end quote. This splitting of costs for this statue, especially between the publics of two nations, is something that rarely ever happens and something that I don't recall hearing about ever happening anywhere else in the art historical record. So definitely a huge, major historical detail. So, of course, once the funds are raised and the statue's built, the pedestal is underway, the next step is getting the thing to the United States. The completed statue, standing at 151 feet 1 inch, aka 46 meters, high, and weighing 225 tons, was disassembled into 350 individual pieces, packed into 214 crates, before being shipped to New York City. It came across the Atlantic aboard the French Navy ship the Isère. The year of 1885 marks the statue's arrival to the U.S. and reassembly here. It arrived in New York Harbor on June 17 and was met with great fanfare from the New York people. However, when the statue arrived, the pedestal was not yet complete, so the entire structure was not reassembled on Bedloe's Island until 1886. Until that point, the crates just sort of chilled. After the pedestal was finished in 1886, The statue was reassembled with surprising speed by a fearless construction crew, in the words of the statueofliberty.org's website, many of them themselves immigrants. The first piece of the statue to be reconstructed was Andre Gustave Eiffel's iron frameworks. The rest of the statue's elements were assembled without the use of scaffolding, actually. They say, quote, all construction materials were hoisted up by steam-driven cranes and derricks, end quote. But have you guys ever heard of worker safety, though? Who am I kidding? These are the same people who had guys building skyscrapers without any sort of harnessing to keep them from falling many stories to the ground. What do I really expect? The sculpted skin prepared by Eiffel used the repoussé technique developed by Eugène Viollet-le-Duc. The technique involved molding lightweight copper sheets by hammering them onto the statue's hollow iron framework. So that was the next step. And apparently, during all this, Fort Wood was not an obstacle in the design, construction, or reassembly of the statue, which, pleasant surprise. Eventually, completion of the statue is celebrated with an official dedication by President Grover Cleveland on October 28th of 1886. It was a whole shebang. They pulled out all the stops for this one. Bartholdi himself released a tricolor French flag that veiled Liberty's face to a roar of guns, whistles, and applause. Finally, there were parades on land and sea. Flags and music were seen and heard throughout the entire city of New York. Though the U.S. public at large was not necessarily thrilled to fund her, public opinion shifts on Lady Liberty as she becomes more and more a symbol of the melting pot American ideology. And so does political opinion once they realize they can make money off of her. At first, the statue was administered by the U.S. Lighthouse Board because the illuminated torch was considered a navigational aid. In 1901, however, administration and maintenance was turned over to the U.S. War Department because Fort Wood, which occupied the same islands as Lady Liberty, was still an operational Army post. In 1924, she is declared a national monument, while Fort Wood was still an operational Army base. Wood was finally deactivated in 1937, at which point both Ellis and Bedloe's Islands were elevated to national monument status. So in 1956, what was once known as Bedloe's Island is renamed Liberty Island. In 1965, then, nearby Ellis Island, once the country's most popular immigration station, was added to the monument's jurisdiction, increasing the total area to about 58 acres. And in 2018, exhibitions on the history of the Statue of Liberty, including the statue's original 1886 torch, moved to the adjacent Statue of Liberty Museum. Over the years, the statue has undergone several changes and reconstructive efforts. For example, there has been a lot of necessary switching out of iron framework pieces over time for greater durability, strength, and protection against the elements. In the mid-1980s, for the centennial celebration of the statue, specifically in July of 1986, an entire statue repair and restoration project was undertaken by both American and French workers. This involved redesigning and reconstructing, in some places, the folds and base of the statue with that same sort of repoussé copper, the one that's hammered out and then sheathed in gold leaf. One element that has seen quite a bit of attention, restoration, changes over the years is the torch itself. The original idea was for it to be made of gilded, solid copper sheet. However, these materials did not last. At its dedication in 1886, 2 rows of portholes were cut from the copper at the bottom of the torch to be able to illuminate it from the inside. In 1892, according to the statueofliberty.org, quote, an 18-inch belt of glass replaced the upper row of portholes, and an octagonal pyramidal skylight with red, white, and yellow glass was installed on top of the flame, end quote. The year 1916 also marks the torch's conversion to electric power, as well as the removal of copper pieces in nearly 250 places, which was replaced with amber-colored cathedral glass. In 1931, a new lighting system was installed, which necessitated 2 holes 16 inches in diameter to be cut into the floor of the balcony around the flame. So clearly, over this long amount of time, many changes were made, and the changes, unfortunately, seriously structurally weakened the torch. As part of that 1980s restoration project, an expert team took a good look at the torch and determined that the original could not be restored, due in part to that century worth of modifications, which radically altered the solid copper flame to one mainly of leaky and corroded glass. The glass issues, in turn, damaged the original torch above the handle beyond repair. So it was removed on July 4th of 1984 and replaced with a replica of the original. That original torch is on display in the statue's museum today. All right, honeys, we'll leave it there for today because I know our episodes of The Business have been running a little long lately, so I will give you a break. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the Statue of Liberty, how she made her way over here to the US and became such an icon. Hope you are thinking this month of the women in your life who not only make a difference that you notice every day, but also the ones who maybe operate a little bit in your background, and take a moment to, whether you approach them with that gratitude or not, takes a moment to express in some way the gratitude you have for them. Take care, and I'll talk to you all soon. This podcast was created, produced, written, posted, edited, and fact-checked by Master's graduate Celia Bugno. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on all of your favorite streaming platforms as well as your social medias.